friends, this is Karen from Blue Rooster Farm, and today we are in the sewing room and we are getting ready to work on a really cute project. All we're going to need is a pack of 5-inch charm squares. So if you want to see what we're making, stick around. Thanks for sticking around. Well, as you saw by the little thumbnail at the beginning, we are making a Tootsie Warmer. And if you don't know what a Tootsie Warmer is, it is a rice bag that warms up your feet. So if you have cold feet at night and you need something in the bed to keep your toes warm, this is a Tootsie Warmer. Now, I recently made one of these just because I was needing one, and this is the one I made. Here I made just a basic cotton bag that was filled with rice, but it's kind of ugly. And I thought, I need to make something cute. You can bling this up a bit. So I made this little, like a pillow cover or pillowcase with the envelope backing to put the rice pad in. And I thought it was really cute, and it does the job really, really well. I really am using it a lot. This has been used. So I thought, why don't I try to design one that I can share with my viewers that just uses charm squares. And so this is what I came up with right here. And it's got the same rice bag inside, but it's just a teeny bit smaller, and it's only using charm squares. You don't need any other fabric for this case. You do need a piece of batting. So if you don't have any laying around, you might have something like an old piece of a towel or something like that that would be used, or that could be used, or you don't even have to quilt it. And this is quilted at the top, and there's some benefits to that. But I just thought this was really cute, and it's almost Valentine's Day, and wouldn't this be a great project for a gift for an older individual who gets cold feet, or if you know somebody that gets shoulder aches or muscle pains, these are great to put on those. Little kids, when they have an earache, warmth is really good for them, and they might just use it for like a little pillow. It's great for headaches, especially sinus headaches. You name it. These heating pads are really handy for all sorts of things. But this one I just designed because I had cold feet. So that's why I'm calling it the Tootsie Warmer. But you can use it for anything. And you know what? If you don't want it to be a rice bag, you can turn this into a little pillow too. Just use stuffing instead in your rice bag, and you'll have a cute little pillow. So today what I'm going to show you is how to make this one right here. I've already made it. I was figuring it out as we went because I wanted to get one that would just use the charm packs. And I think it turned out really, really cute. And you could make a couple with one charm pack. I think this probably took about 22 charms all together. And you can see they're all patched in there, the binding and everything. So if you want to see how this is made, here is my tutorial. And I hope you enjoy it. And if you have any questions about it, leave them in the comments. I'll be glad to answer. Thanks for watching. Well, let's get started. So here is my original heating pad case that I made for myself. And when I made it, I did choose some charm squares, which are 5-inch squares of fabric. But I also had some yardage of this cream color fabric that I used for the background. And so you don't have a whole lot. You just have the bottom two corners and these three squares up here at the top. But I want to try to make this just with charm squares. And also on the back, I had actually used 10-inch square. I think it was one 10-inch square. No, it was two 10-inch squares to make this. And so I wanted you guys to be able to make this with just a charm pack, because some of you may not be a sewer and you might not have scraps or other fabric laying around. So I thought if I could make this all with one charm pack, then any of you guys could do it as well. And so I really like this collection. And this is a collection for the cause, etchings, and it's by, I believe that says Howard Marcus and Three Sisters. And it's a really, really pretty fabric. I've had it for a year or so, so it's about a year old. But I thought this would be beautiful colors for hearts. And so this is what I've chosen, just because this time of year, I think this goes really well with this time of year. And I've pulled out some squares right here. But I think this is what I'm going to use for the heart. You know, in the other case that I have here, I just used 4 of the same colors, but different prints. This one, I'm going to kind of mix it up a little bit. This colorway of this charm square has reds and grays and this pretty teal color and pinks and creams. And so I thought I'd use this gray and a nice pretty red and a teal and then another red for my heart. And if you will just imagine cutting out a heart in those 4 squares in that shape, that's what it's going to look like. So those are the 4 colors for my heart. Now I'm also going to need to use some background fabric. And again, I want to use my charm squares. So I am going to use some of the light fabric that I have in this collection. And so I looked through it and I found some light fabrics that have this pretty gray in them. And I thought that was really pretty. Some of it has handwriting. There's some paisley. And there's also some that have the aqua, and there's some that have, I believe, some reds, and there's another gray. And so there's different colorways in the creams as well. But I thought I'm just going to keep it scrappy, but I think I want to make it gray and cream for the background. And again, whichever charm pack you have will be what you're choosing for your background. So I only need 3 squares for the background right here. I need 1 for the bottom corner, or 1 for each bottom corner, and then 1 for all of the corners of the top part of the heart. So I think I'll use that one for this bottom corner. And I think I will use this one right here for this other bottom. It's got some pretty handwriting on it. And then I've got a couple of more here. Let me think. I think that handwriting goes pretty well with it. All kind of the same color. The paisley's a little more gray. And maybe I'll use this for the border. Do you see the little border I have right here? It will take 2 charm packs for that, so I might save this for the border. We'll have to see what it looks like. I think that might look good. And again, I put a border on this. You don't have to, but I put a border because it allows the heart to pop a little bit Otherwise, the heart kind of gets blended in with the binding. And so I went ahead and put a small border on there. So I'm going to set this aside here for that. And so what I need to do is I need to cut, or I need to take these two right here. I need to draw a line going from this corner to this corner and from this bottom corner to this corner. And as you see, that is this line right here. So let me get my pin, and I'm just using a friction pin, but this is going to be in the seam, so you can use whatever you want. I wouldn't use a Sharpie or anything like that. You don't want it to get onto your other fabrics. A friction pin is a pin that will erase with heat. I use the friction pin whenever it's in my seams. I still am not real confident about using it on squares that it would be seen. Like, I wouldn't draw lines, you know, here and here with it, because even though it disappears with heat, that residue is still there, and it can come back if it gets really cold. And I don't know what it's going to do in the future. You know, you just never know how that's going to react. You know, 15 years from now, are we going to see all these lines on quilts? I don't know. But I just am playing it safe. So I've got my two lines right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew on a 1/4 inch away from each line, here and here. And then I'm also going to cut these blocks right here down to a 4.5 inch square. And I can do that right now. Let me just set these right here for a second, and let's just go ahead and cut that while we're here. And you can use any kind of straight edge and use it. I have 4.5 inch square templates, and this makes it really easy. Now, if you did not have a 4.5 inch and you had another ruler, what you do is you take your ruler with the ones and the ones here, and that will go in your upper right-hand corner if you're right-handed. And then you find 4.5 inches here, and you find 4.5 inches here. Make sure your edge of your fabric is on those 4.5 inch lines, and then you just trim right here. And all quilting rulers, even if it's a long one, would work the same way. All right, so we have 2 pieces of fabric that are 4.5 inches, and I'm going to sew these on both sides of the line. I'll bring you right back. All right, so here are my 2 pieces that I just did. Now, I do want to make sure, because it's really quite obvious, that my print is going to be going the right direction when I lay this out. This one, you know, I don't want it to be upside down on my heart, because it is really obvious that you know, this is a print and writing, and so when I lay this out, I want to make sure I've got that correct. So what I'm going to do is take a straight edge, and I'm just going to cut across on that line, and you can certainly use scissors as well. Just cutting directly on the line. And now you have 2 half square triangles, but you're only going to use 2, so you can save the other 2. Now, for those of you that are really wanting to save your fabric, yes, you can just cut 2 triangles and sew them together. That's okay. But I'm going to be using these for other things, so I like to have them. You can make a second pillow with these, or second heart block with these as well. So I'm going to keep one, and I'm going to put one aside. So I guess I'm going to keep, let me see which one I'm going to use on this one here. This is the one that's directional. So that one would be fine for this side, or is that upside down? There. That one is upside down, so I'm not going to use that one. Oh, this right here. No, I'm not going to use that one. But I can use this one here. If I have it over here, I wouldn't mind it going this way, but I think I'm just going to stick with it just like this. The writing is here. There is some writing going this way, but most of the writing is this way. So I'm going to switch these two blocks. And then I need to use, we'll just use this one right here. So we've got that and that. Now I need to cut 4 squares that are 1 3/4 inch. So let me scoot this up, and I am just going to use, let's see, I think I was going to use this fabric right here. And all I do is cut 1 3/4 inch this way. And sometimes I like to get those little edges off. So I'll just cut those off just to make it so that I can measure it a little more exact, especially when you're working with small blocks. And 1 3/4 all the way down. Everything looks like they're lining up. We'll do that. And I'll need 2 of them. Okay, so I can stack them on top of each other. You can't get 4 out of 1 strip, so we just need 1 additional strip. I am going to cut the edge right there. Turn this around. 1 3/4 inch. And there I've got 2. And there I have 4, and then that was just too small. I am going to set these aside because I might have a use for this. We'll see. I'm not sure. I haven't figured out my binding yet, but we're going to figure that out as we go. So let's pull this back down here. Now these triangles are going to be going on this. Now I have writing again. I don't know why I chose that. So I'm going to need to turn these a certain way until I find out which is the right direction. I think it might be that one. Nope. One more turn, I believe. Yep. So what you want to do is you want, if you have directional fabric, and it's not really a big deal, these are just going to be so small, and usually I'm not picky about directional fabric, but I'm just going to show you the way you can do this if you are picky. You're going to be sewing and then flipping this back, and right there my writing is going the right direction. So I'm going to need to draw a line going here to here. And it looks like if I turn it this way, maybe, just have to practice and see. Yep, that one. And I'm gonna have to number these probably. I guess I can just work with them until I figure it out. Yep, that one. And I'll just keep them on there. There. Okay, so I am going to draw lines, and I'm just keeping them in place so I remember which block they are for. And I'm going to go corner to corner again. And you do want to be really careful on getting these corner to corner. These are small pieces, and just being a little bit off does distort your block. You want it, if you want it to turn out, you know, nicely shaped. Now when I sew on this line, on these squares, I'm going to sew directly on the line. And one thing I notice, if I sew just right on the top side of that line, they flip better, and they're not going to be too short. So let me just put little pins on these. Oops, and I did the line the wrong way here. Well, let me iron this, take the ink off. And see, that heat takes that right off. You guys are probably going, no, don't do that. Don't sew it that way. I can't talk and do things at the same time anymore. Here. And here. So I'm going to go to the sewing machine and sew directly on the line, actually just a hair toward the top. Just a little tiny bit. Okay, I'll be right back. All right, let's take a look at these, see if we got them. So that goes back, and you want to do this before you trim them, just to make sure they are working. That one looks good. And that looks good. So what I'm going to do is, you can take a scissors or rotary cutter and just trim a 1/4 inch away from that seam. I don't know what my dogs are barking at. I think we have some neighbors going by on their horses. They just seem to like to bark at them. Okay, so let's see. Now for pressing, I like to do one of these going toward the dark fabric, and I like to do one of these going toward the light fabric. So that way our seams are going to nest down here. On these, I will put these two right here, just press them back. These I will do one just like that. This one I am going to press so that the seam goes toward the dark right there, because that way it'll allow those two to nest when I sew them. Okay, I'm going to press these and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've cleaned off some of my clutter here. Now we're ready to put these blocks together. So what we're going to do is we're going to flip this one back right here, and we are going to line up that edge. And because you ironed one of these corners to the dark side, they are going to nest really nicely when you sew. And when I say nest, that means they're going to butt up against each other so that they will have the same amount of, you're not going to have a real thick seam there with overlapping fabric. When you push them together, they just kind of lock in place. And so I'm going to sew right here 1/4 inch. If you need to pin it, I would pin it right here where they're locking, and at the bottom as well, and then just feed it through 1/4 inch. I'm going to do the same thing with these two, And the same thing here, if you've pressed one to dark and one to the light, your two corners are going to lay nice and flat, and the seams are going to just overlap perfectly. And I always put a little pin right here. And now I'm ready to sew this one 1/4 of an inch. So 1/4 of an inch on both of those. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to sew across here. So I'm not going to press yet because I'm going to be flipping that seam. So when I sew, I'm going to push one seam this way and one seam that way, and just make sure, and you can feel when they fall into place, make sure your seams right there are overlapping. And I can stick a pin in it. If you wanted to press, you could press open at this point before you seam this, but I'm going to just do it this way and then press all at once. So let's sew 1/4 of an inch down that strip. There we have our heart block all pieced together. I just pressed that seam open and everything is pressed nice and flat. Now we're going to put the border on. Now if you want to, I have a few little edges that are sticking out just a little bit. We're just going to line up, and I usually just put a line on my block, on a line on the ruler. And you shouldn't have to take off, whoops, and I scooted it. You shouldn't have to take off much, but that little corner was hanging out. And I'm being a perfectionist here just in case you want to be really, really accurate. Normally, I am not this accurate. I just go right ahead and piece this together. But this would be the correct way, I guess. That one looks good. That one at the bottom looks good. Okay, so now we've got nice straight edges. Okay, our block is all pressed. I've trimmed the sides if they needed to have a little bit of trimming done, so it's nice and straight. Now we are going to put a border. Now the reason I'm putting a border on is because I don't want to get that heart lost in our pattern. It just seems to be able to pop it out a little bit more. If it goes right up to our binding, it just seems to get lost a little bit. You certainly don't need to add a border, but I'm going to. And it'll also make it just a tiny bit bigger, and it will make it perfect for using our charm packs on. So what I was going to do originally was use these two fabrics, but when I kind of tested them out a little bit, you know, I'm doing scrappy and all of a sudden I have this grayish color border, and I don't like that. I think I'm gonna keep it scrappy. Now I've got one more block that has some gray in it, so I could do that. And then I have one that has some cream, so I could do that. And that pretty much goes along with it. You know, I could substitute one of these in, and that's not too bad to have one of them substituted in. I think I'm going to use these two. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these two and we are going to put them right sides together, and we're going to sew 1/4 of an inch down one of the sides. Okay, so we've got those two together. I just pressed to one side. Now what we're going to do is we're going to cut this into some strips. Right now, we're going to cut it into 1 1/4 inch strips, and that means we can get 4 strips if we cut really accurately. And so what I'm going to do is I am going to start in the middle. I'm going to cut them in half first. Make sure. And since I have those little peaks, and on this one, it looks like the peaks are, you measured from the top of the peaks. So we are going to cut a 2.5 inch strip first. And then I'm going to cut this one right here into 1.25 inches. Okay. And then I'm going to hold off on this one because I'm not sure if I'm going to need to have some corner squares. Let's see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this to the sewing machine. Now I can offset so it doesn't look I think I'm just going to match the seams on this one. So let's match the seams, and we're going to sew 1/4 inch here. We're going to match the seams here. Now if those are open, so that's good, okay. And we're going to sew 1/4 inch on each side. All right, so what I did was I flipped these fabrics so that the fabrics were in opposite corners. I thought that looked a little scrappier. Now what we're going to do is trim those ends off. Just have a straight line, and they come right off. Like that. So you're going to see that when you lay this next strip, you have too large of a block for this to cover this whole piece. We could add a cornerstone, and that would be fine. In fact, that's what we're going to do, but we're not going to make it a color because I don't want it to look wonky on our block, because it's going to be such a small square that it could easily look wonky. So what we're going to do is that piece that I had said to put aside, it was the piece that we had left over when we cut these blocks, and it was in one strip like this. We are going to use that. I've cut it into a half. Okay, but before we do that, we are going to cut this piece right here. We're going to fold it in half, and we're going to go from the seamed edge, which is the edge of the fabric, and place that edge of the fabric right here at 4.5 inches, and then trim off this. Now, this should be 1/4 inch on both sides longer than your block. Yay, it is. And then we're going to take these pieces, and they're too big, but that's okay. We're going to put one here, and we're going to put one here. And yes, this is double thickness because we're going to cut this in half when we're done. We're just making it a lot easier for sewing. So let's sew 1/4 inch on both ends. All right, so I have this. I pressed both of these seams in. Now we're going to match all 3 seams when we sew. But first, let's cut this in half. And this was a 2.5 inch strip, so we are going to cut it down to 1.25. let's see, I'm going to turn this one like this because this fabric and this fabric and this fabric and this fabric match. And I'm going to turn this one like this. Okay, so now I'm going to turn this seam this way since the other one is going to the right. These seams right here should nest nicely. Now your ends may not match up. In fact, they shouldn't because we just added a piece of fabric, and that's okay. We'll trim that off at the end. In fact, we're going to trim it a little bit more than that when we're done. I like to make things a little bit bigger sometimes, just a hair bigger, and trim them down so that you have it nicely measured. So this one is going, the one underneath is going to my right, so I'm going to make this seam go to my left. Pin that in place. These should nest. And you can feel if they're nesting. They just lay nice and flat. They just butt up next to each other. If you feel like it's a lump there, that means they're not laying side by side. They're still on top of each other. And I'll sew 1/4 of an inch away from both edges. Okay, and I pressed it toward the border on both sides, and there is your block. Isn't that pretty? Wouldn't a quilt be beautiful in this? You could get a layer cake and you would get several blocks, and you could design something that would look really cute with this. So I'm not going to trim the outside yet because we're going to go ahead and we're going to make the back portion of our pillow. And remember, I'm using mine as a foot warmer or just a something if you need some heat on something, your ankle, your shoulder, your back. So I am making that, but if you wanted to make a pillow, this is the exact same thing as a pillow. You would just put an insert with polyester or some kind of pillow filling, and it would be the same as what we're going to do with the rice bag, but you're going to fill it with your stuffing. So let's go ahead and set this aside, put that right there. And now we need to do our backing. And I think this was the fabric that I had chosen for, I think that was my border. So let me grab some fabric for backing. All right, I think I have it figured out. These two fabrics right here are going to be this. These two fabrics right here are going to be this. Then the cuff is going to be these two fabrics. And then there's an inside cuff there too. And it's going to be these two fabrics. And of course, you know, you don't have to have a pretty cuff on this one. You could, you know, use whatever you wanted, but you know what I'm going to do, since I don't care for, I think I'm going to use these two because I don't care for that fabric that much. I mean, it's pretty, but I can use it more for the inside cuff. So that's going to be the inside cuff, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to sew these two together. We're going to sew these two together. And then we're going to sew these two together. And these two together, okay? And I'll be right back. Okay, so I've got these all sewn and ironed, and I think I've got the layout the way I want. Since this fabric here shows a lot more than this one, I chose my favorite fabrics. I like these two better. and this one will be on this one. And then of course this one's the cuff that's going to be hidden, and this one's going to be this one right here. So what we're going to do is, this is a really neat method that I don't know if I just figured it out or I've been doing it for years. So it goes along with that magic pillowcase. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put right sides up my border or my cuff fabric first. Then the fabric that is going to be the backing is right side up right on top of it. And we're just going to kind of fold this one like this. We're going to fold this one up, and we're going to make sure all 3 fabrics are together and even. Same thing over here. And over here. Make sure they're all right against the edge there. Okay, then we're going to do the same thing with this one. Cuff right side up, the fabric for your backing right side up, right on top of it. Okay, roll this one, take this. Now you could have a smaller cuff, but I like this cuff because it makes sure that the pillow inside there is going to stay in there and not pop open. And of course, if you were not using one charm pack, you would not have to be doing all this piecing. You could just use one solid fabric. But we're doing this because we are trying to do this whole project with just a charm pack. So now I'm just going to sew. I'm going to sew about 3/8 to 1/2 of an inch. I'm going to go bigger than 1/4 of an inch because this will have some pull on it. So whatever your sewing machine has, and you could go bigger if you wanted to because you're going to have plenty of room. All right, so when you do about 1/2 of an inch, you are pretty much guaranteed that you've got all 3 fabric edges in there, so you can check and make sure. So next, what we're going to do is we are going to take this and we're going to fold that cuff part down just a little bit, and then we're going to pull out the fabric that's in there as we pull the cuff. And by doing this, we haven't had to do any fussy ironing and measuring. We just have a cuff on this pillow where the seams are all enclosed inside. There's no seams on this side. There's no seams on that side. So there's one. Let's pull this one out. Again, fold down your outside fabric and then pull out. And it's not hard to do. You've got plenty of space to pull it through. So just don't get too aggressive with it. You don't want to pull your seams out. And so what I'm going to do now, there it is, beautiful. I'm going to press both of these, making sure I don't have any little puckers in there. And then we're going to top stitch. After I get it nice and pressed, we're going to top stitch on the cuff portion about 1/4 of an inch, or a little less than 1/4 of an inch, or 1/4 of an inch, because that way it'll get that seam allowance that's inside there too, and it'll just lay nice and flat. So we'll do the same with this one, and I'll bring you back. So I have both of my pillow backing pieces completed. I have the top stitch and they're nice and pressed. So I'm going to set these aside, and now we're going to come back to our block and we are going to quilt it. So you will need something for your batting. Now, if you're not a person that has batting laying around, You can buy it at Walmart, Joann's, in little packages. They have pretty small packages and it's not that expensive. But if you're wanting to use something around the house, you certainly could. You could use an old towel, maybe one that's not real plush, something that would give it just a little bit of thickness, a couple layers of flannel. If anybody has any ideas for something that you could use inside this to quilt, please put it in the comments for people that are wanting to try this but don't want to go out and purchase any batting. The other thing is, normally they recommend using 100% cotton batting when you're doing something for the microwave, like the potato sacks or the bowl cozies. I have been making these for a long time, and I just use my regular polyester cotton blend batting. We're not getting this super hot. We're just getting it so that it's warm enough to warm our feet, our hands, help with some aches and pains in our muscles or our joints. So it's not going to be boiling or anything like that. I have never had a problem with it, but if you want to be on the safe side, use 100% cotton batting. I have 100% cotton batting, but I'm just going to use what I have right here because I have some scraps and I want to use them. So no quilting police around. You can do what you want. Now, when we're getting ready to quilt, you can secure this on if you need to. You can put down pins. I do have some quilting adhesive. This 505 temporary adhesive is what I use for small projects when I am quilting at my machine, and it doesn't take but a bit. Pins work fine. Again, this is such a small piece that I wouldn't be too concerned about it. You could also use some Elmer's glue, the school washable glue. You could put some kind of on the back of your fabric and then lay it down and iron it, but you'll have to do it quickly before it dries, and that will hold it just enough to help you get it stitched. The reason why we baste this like this is because sometimes when we're sewing, our foot likes to press that fabric and it gets kind of wonky. And if you have it adhered well or pin basted, or even you could do big basting stitches, that would be fine too. But if you have those on there, it kind of keeps it secure and in place and helps your quilting look a little nicer. So mine is ready to go. I am just going to do what I did here, just a small top stitch right next to all of the seams on both sides. And it's less than 1/4 of an inch. You could do 1/4 of an inch without any problem. I even did it down here on the border. You don't have to. It's just whatever you want. Some people like to do stripes or lines going down. I like to do that. Lines going across, lines going both down and across at an angle with cross hatching. You could put your quilting foot on your sewing machine and just do squiggle lines, or if you're good at it, you can make a pattern, whatever you like. I am just going to use my regular presser foot. I'm just going to do that top stitching because it is the easiest without changing out my foot. If I do the lines, I usually like to use my walking foot because that just keeps it from getting wonky on me. If you notice that on your sewing machine, because we're not going to put anything on the back of this, if you notice that it's kind of having a hard time pulling through, you can put a piece of tissue paper back here or a piece of, like newspaper or something like that and sew over that. You could also, if you want, put a piece of fabric back here. I'm not doing it just because I'm not going to waste a piece of fabric for something that we're not going to see. It is inside this pillow underneath our rice pack, and no one's ever gonna see it. So I'm just using the backing like this. So I'm gonna get this done and I'll bring you back when I've got it done. Here is my heart block all quilted, and I think it looks pretty good. Now what we need to do is we need to trim down this block. These right here, I believe, are 9.5 inches. Yep, 9.5 inches. So we need to make a 9.5 inch square. Now, we added a little bit extra to the border because I wanted to make sure that we could trim it down. And sometimes when you're quilting, it does shrink up. So we need to trim all of this down now. Now, you could use any kind of ruler, but I prefer my large one. If you were using a regular ruler, what you could do is you could measure, let's see if I've got one here. So we need it to be 9.5 inches. That means you're gonna have 4 3/4 on both sides. So you could go from that very center seam make sure it's lined up all the way up and down, and then trim off this and then flip it over and do the same. Then you could do the same from this seam right here, and that should give you a good block. If you have a large square, and I have a 12.5, which if you do quilting and you do lots of blocks, this is nice to have because you can square up any size up to 12.5 inches. And all you need to do is your ones are up here, both ones are up here. We want to make it 9.5. So we are going to have to come over here, and I'm going to put 4 3/4 on my ruler. It's a little tricky to see that seam through the glare. Okay, that looks like I've got it there. That looks like I've got it there. And then I also like to make sure that I'm running pretty straight here across, and so these little lines are going across this seam here too. That way you know it's kind of squared up. So let me look at this one more time with my glasses on. Okay, and when you're sure of yourself, and I'm looking over here and I'm looking to see if 9.5, because that's what we're gonna, if it looks good, just to make sure you're not on something strange. Sometimes your rulers get turned around, and I think we're good. So we're gonna cut this side right here. Then we are going to pull it down, and we're gonna put 4 3/4, and we could have done this a while ago and do 2 cuts at once, but this way I know I'm getting it straight. So 4 3/4, and it matches up nicely here still. And if it didn't, you'd want to check and see, and it may be that that first line wasn't quite right. So I think that looks good. I can also see my diagonal line here just a little bit, and it's going from one corner of the block, not the border, but the block, to the other one. So that tells me it's in a good spot. Okay, so once we have those two sides, it's going to be really easy. Flip the corner that was here over to here, and 9.5 down here, 9.5 over here, and just make sure you have ones over here, 1 and 1, Otherwise, you're going to get something wonky. Okay, and that looks good. Looks like that middle line is going through at my seam, my corner. That looks good. You know, when you work so hard at something, you don't want to make a mistake at the end like that and cut it wrong. So here we have our nice, neat block. So there are two ways that you can make this. I like the binding. I think the binding really sets it off. But if you don't want to do binding, there is another way of laying this out. So let me first show you, if you did not want to do binding, what you would do. If you don't want to add binding and you just want to flip it inside out, you would take face up your block, face down your good. When I say good, that means the top one first, face down. So they're right sides together. And this one right here, is this top one right here, our nice one. Then this one goes face down, and it goes right here. Now you see how all the edges are matched. What you would do is you would pin it securely all the way around. I would do about a 1/2 inch seam just to make sure you are getting all of the fabric. I would even back stitch on these two intersections. And this one over here too. You might just go over this whole strip twice from these cuffs, just because they're going to get the pull when you're using them. Okay. Then after you have sewn all the way around it, you can trim your corners without cutting your seam, and then flip it inside out. And what that will do is that will give you a pillow without a border. Let me get a pillow that has that for you. Just a second. So I went to my couch and I found some Christmas pillows I had made. And this one right here is one that does not have the binding, okay? And I used a pillow that was already on my couch, so it's a little bit full. That's why it's kind of bulging. But you have your envelope back here, and you have no binding. It's just smooth. So if you like, let me see if I can, I don't think I can back up any further. If you like no binding, this is the way you're going to do it. And then you'll be done with the case. Okay. With the binding is like the one I've done. And I love the pop of color around the edges. Here is a Christmas pillow that has a binding that I made. And as you see, it looks very nice on there. So it's your decision. Your decision. I am going to sew this with the binding. I think this other way is pretty much you can understand that well enough that I don't have to do it for you. Again, just stitch all the way around 1/2 inch from the edge. I would do this twice over here too, where these cuffs are. Trim your corners so that you can get that stuff out so that your corners will point, and then just turn it inside out. And then your pillow or your case will look just a little bit smaller than this one. Okay? That's that one. Now, if you wanted to, you could just bind this by itself and have a mat. You know, you've got a quilted block. But what we're going to do is we are going to do it with a binding. So here's how we're going to do it. We're going to put the right side face down, okay? The right side's face up. And this is what it's going to look like when it's finished. So make sure this is the way you like it, because this is the way it's going to look. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and I am going to pin this just to keep it in place. And I will probably match those seams there. Then I am going to do a stitch that's probably about 1/4 of an inch all the way around. Now the reason why I'm doing that is because we're still going to put a binding on it, and so we're going to have 2 more stitches going on, but I want to get this secured. So I'm going to go close to the edge so that that stitch won't be seen. It'll be hidden in the binding, and go all the way around 1/4 of an inch from the edge. Okay, when I've got that done, I will bring you back. I have stitched all the way around, so it's all secure. So if I want to try opening it, it opens without any problem. Now what I need to do is get the binding. And so I need to pick out 5 charms, and I picked out dark colors. I thought that would set it off a little bit better. You certainly could use whatever you like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew all of these charms, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah, all 5 charms in together in one long strip. And I'll bring you back when I've got that done. I have the strips all sewn together, and then I just pressed all the seams in one direction. And when I put them together, I just tried to scatter the colors. Now what we're going to do is we're going to fold it in half, and it doesn't matter if it's right sides or wrong sides together. We're just going to do this so we can cut it. Move that. Make sure the edges of your fabric are lined up right here. And we're going to cut it into 2.5 inch strips. So this is 5 inches. So if you cut it at 2.5 inches on this side, the other side will also be 2.5 inches. And I like to line up my fold down here with a line, and then get 2.5 here, because if you don't get this lined up down here, it could be wonky, and they call it a dog leg, and your strip will look kind of like this. Not that exaggerated, but a bit that way. It's not a big deal on binding, because you can stretch it a little bit, but if it were piecing, you would definitely want to do that. So now we have our 2 pieces, and I am going to connect this piece with this piece, so I will have one long binding strip. Now, if you want, you could open up your seams and press open, and that will reduce the bulk in your binding. And I think I did that. Yeah, I did that on this one. I might go back and do that. That way we won't, our binding won't be so bulky, and it's easier to sew over. So yeah, I forgot about that. I am going to press all of my seams open after I stitch this one together, so I'll have one long strip. All right, so I went ahead and I sewed this in half, long ways, lengthwise, as I was opening up my seams. Now, like I was saying a while ago, when you're doing your binding, you are folding this many times. So there is 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of fabric, and then you're going to also have this in it. If you have your seams just ironed to one side, you're going to increase that bulk. When it's like this with the you know, without any seam in there, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of fabric. Then you add 1 layer of seam and it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 layers of fabric. Well, if you end up having 2 layers of seam in there and they're overlapping, you're going to have, you know, a lot more than 8 layers right here, and that's what makes it bulky. So I do recommend on this, since we are just sewing these pieces on straight across, go ahead and open those seams. You'll be glad you did. All right, so now we've got enough binding from those 5 squares to put on our case here. And so I like to start on the bottom and I like to start on the back because I will do machine binding. Now, if you want to hand bind it, do it on the top and then pull it back and stitch with the hand and with your needle. If you like to do it where you're doing it by hand on the back, then you could put it here and then flip it over and then hand stitch it down in the back. That's the old traditional way of quilting and binding. But since this is nothing that I really am wanting to pass down to my family and be an heirloom, we are just going to do it on the sewing machine. So I'm going to start at the back and the bottom. I am going to put this one about 3/4 of the way, maybe 2/3 of the way across. Let's do 2/3. 2/3 of the way across. I am just going to start stitching way over here, and then I'm going to do my binding like that. When I get back around here, I will only stitch to about here, and then I will be able to attach my binding together. If you don't know how to do the binding and sew this on, I suggest you go to my dish mat, or if you want a really detailed instruction on how to do binding, it would, I think, be the Leaf Quilt Table Topper. I talk about that and show you exactly how to stitch it and how to do binding. But if you're new to binding, you need to watch those videos so that you know exactly what you're doing if you want to do it correctly and make it look nice. There's a lot of other videos out there that you can watch, but it's not hard. It's just that there's a certain technique to it. And I won't put it on this video since I've put it on all my other ones. So I'm going to attach this binding and then I'll bring you back and I'll show you how I connect them, because a lot of people know how to put binding on, but they get confused on the connecting the 2 binding pieces. But I'll show you my technique on that. All right, so I have added my binding all the way around. And one thing I forgot to tell you is that when you're sewing this binding on, I suggest using a 3/8 inch seam, because we did do a very close to the edge seam when we were basting it down, so this would cover it up. And also, this is pretty wide binding for a small project like this, and so that will make the binding a little bit smaller and more easy to turn and everything like that. So what we've done is we've sewn all the way around, and I'm back here. So I've gone to here and I've gone to here. So now I'm going to lay my pieces out like this. And on this piece right here, I am going to cut just a little bit off of it. If yours isn't, I've got plenty of room over here. If yours, you don't have a lot of room, this one's pretty close to this here, you could always take it right here. And this right here is the width of our binding, right? Okay, so this is the overlap that you need on your binding. So I'm going to make sure these are nicely pulled so that they're not loose. I'm going to lay this right here. This is the seam of the one underneath. And let's see if I can get you a little closer. This is the seam right here that is, you You can see that they're the same color, sorry, right there. So I'm going to lay that on that edge, go across here. This is where I need to cut this strip because we need an overlap that's the same width of our binding that we cut. So I like to cut it just a fraction smaller. So just, gosh, just a thickness of a dime or a nickel smaller, because I can always stretch it. But sometimes if I cut it, and this is right on a seam too, that'll be good. It actually won't make it bad because it's right on the edge. Because if it's too loose, it'll tend to get a little pucker in there, and it's better to be able to pull it and get it tight than to have the pucker. So there we have our overlap, the thickness of our binding. And so see, here's what I was telling you about. I've got that seam allowance right there. That's okay, we will make it do. Now what I do is I stick my fingers inside my binding and I put my thumbs here. Now normally you would attach like this, but we're going to do it so that it doesn't have as much bulk. We are going to attach it. I'm turning this one this way and this one up. Now we have them going at an angle like the capital letter A, and this is a small piece, so it's hard to tell. So you've got your leg of your A here, your leg of your A here. Again, with this small piece, it's harder to see the A. And we're going to do the piece that goes across on the A. So we're going to go from this corner to this corner right here. So we're going to line up this edge. And again, we've got all that extra fabric in there, but it's okay. We can do it. And I'm going to put a pin right there just to hold it. And I'm also going to put a pin up here. And normally I don't put this many pins, but because of that extra fabric, I am, just to make sure I've got it in the right spot. And this is a small piece right here, so it's easier to pop it when I don't have pins. So I'm just putting some pins in. Now, if you have some seam tape on the base of your sewing machine, you can just follow that and go right directly from this corner to this corner. If not, and it's easier for you, I'll do this so that you can see what we're doing. We can just draw a line, and again, you have to kind of look to see where your piece of fabric corner is behind there. It's right there. And then the corner here. Okay, and we're just going to draw a line. Okay, so there is our line, and I'm going to go sew right there on that line. Okay, I have sewn that, but before I trim this off, I want to make sure I've got it correct, so I lay it in there and it's laying correctly. So let's trim off a 1/4 inch from that seam we just sewed. And we're getting rid of most of that extra fabric right there. We have a little right here, and I'll just leave it. It's not that bad at all there. So let me get my thread here. Whoops, there it is. Now I'm going to go ahead and open up this seam. And then press it with my fingernails. And then close this back. I can pin this. And now I'm just going to finish sewing that binding on from here to here and backstitch at both points. Okay, and there we have it, just right. I'm going to take this to the iron, and I am going to press so that I don't have any pleats at that seam line, and then I'll bring you back. Okay, I've got it all pressed. Now I just need to flip it to the front. Okay, so at this point, what we're going to do is we are just going to cover up those stitches, and we're going to put this piece or this top edge right here just right a little bit over those stitches that we made. Everyone has really liked the idea of getting that glued down because it's a little more stable to sew. I will do that for you here. Okay, I got the big gun. My little one's just about out, so we're going to do this one. I'll just use the corner of it. So what we do in order to use, this is washable school glue. It's purple, but it turns white. What we're going to do is we're going to put a little bit right here on, and this way you can see where I'm marking it, on my edge of my quilt or my block. And the stitch line is right there, so this is all being covered. I'm not putting any glue on anything that's not covered. And we can use pins, or we can use clips and do it all and then press, or I can just go to the ironing board right now and press, and that's what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna press that. And that is with a dry iron. Don't do a wet iron because that won't allow it to stick. So then I'm going to do the same thing over here. So on my corners, just like a regular quilt, just like to get those nice and straight, and then pull them over those stitches. That, and then I'm going to press that, and when they cool they are secured, but if you want to put some clips in while they're cooling down, you can. It looks like those are good right now. So let's go to this corner and go across this edge. And of course you could be putting this on your binding too. I just find that it's easier for me right there, and I don't get too carried away that way. Okay, same thing here. And I'm taking it to the iron to press, and just make sure you cover up those seams. And we're on our last one. And I just use my stiletto just to make it where the edge is and fold up over that fabric. That way it makes a nice straight edge. And as I do that, I try to make that corner meet that other one right there. Sometimes it's easier than others. And let it set for a second, and then I can carry it over to the iron. Okay, and then we're right here at this corner, and we're continuing to do this one. So I'm going to put a little bit of glue in there. I might need to pull some back right there. So I might need to pull this one up a little bit, and it's okay, you can always re-glue. It's not, you know, this, I could easily pull this off. This glue isn't super glue by any means. I know as a teacher, having the stick glue, everything would always eventually fall off if the kids used the stick glue. So it was pretty temporary. Okay, I'm gonna put a little glue right there. And I'm gonna press that corner. All right, we've got it all basted down. Now we just need to sew it. And I am just going to sew really close to this edge, making sure that my seam is covered as I go. And I usually keep the stiletto handy to just if I need to make sure that the fabric's not getting pulled away as my sewing machine is running over that fabric. You could use a different color fabric thread. I'm using cotton thread today. I usually use cotton thread, and my needle is a quilting needle. I will check the number on that. I forgot which one, but it is a quilting needle, so it is good for all of this bulk and stuff. It does well on it. You will need to have a fairly heavy-duty needle to get through, you know, some of this bulk. It's not super heavy, I mean, by any means, but you know, a fine needle might break. So I'm gonna just use a white thread, and even though it'll show up, it's okay. This will be fine. My white thread's on that too, so I'll just match it. So I'm gonna do my binding, and I'll bring you back. And here is our case, our pillowcase, our rice bag case. It is looking really cute. And the direction of this doesn't matter. You could have had it going different directions. It doesn't matter. I like to have mine going up and down like that, but that wouldn't matter if yours is different. So now we need to make the insert that goes inside. Now, okay, so I have my two 9.5-inch pieces of fabric. Now, if you have two pieces of fabric that have a right and a wrong side, you want to put right sides together. Okay, so this would be the wrong side, and this would be the wrong side. So right sides together. And what we're going to do is we'll pretend like this is the halfway mark, just kind of eyeball it, about 2 inches away from that halfway, and about 2 inches away from that. We're going to leave this open, okay? But we are going to take and sew all the way around using about a 1/2 inch seam. Okay, so now we've got this opening up here, and if you want, you can take and cut these corners off without going through your stitch line. I don't know if you can see, there's my stitch line. These are actually thread scissors, but we're making do with them. Okay, so now that we've got our corners trimmed, let's turn this inside out. So now what I'm going to do is I may press this. A lot of times, especially with this thicker fabric, it's hard to get the seam to pull out of the edges there. I think I will press, and then what I will do, here's my opening up here. I'm going to also press so that opening is pressed nicely. Okay. I am going to sew from this point where the opening is. Actually, let's just do this. I'm going to sew from this edge a top stitch all the way down here to the bottom and back up, but we'll save this for one stitch at the end. And then after I get my top stitch done, I'm going to go one line or two stitches. I'm going to go once and then back over it just to make sure it's tough and reinforced. And you can even put them like an 1/8 of an inch away to make it even more stronger. And just put a stitch in there, and then what you'll have is two little openings at the top, and those will be openings that a little funnel can fit in, and we can fill it with the rice. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll bring you back to show you what I have. All right, here's what I have, and I have my seam, or my top stitch I should say, all the way around there, and then I put two seams just right side by side, and my two little holes are right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to fill this up with rice. I'm sure there's other things you can use, but I'm going to use rice, and I just take my funnel and I stick it right there. And I just put it in there, and I've got some right there. And I'm going to fill mine up about 2/3 full. You can fill it to whatever thickness you want. You do need to be able to get it in and out of your cover. If you fill it all the way to the top, it's going to be too much. But just a little over half is good. Fill it. And when I get mine filled, I will bring you back to show you how we close it off. All right, so I've filled mine just a little over halfway. And when I've still got my opening up here, so I've got to be careful. But when I lay it out, it's a nice thickness. Okay, so we're going to get all that rice to the bottom. And I just spilled some out. And what we're going to do is we are going to make sure there's no rice to hit your needle. And we are going to take our sewing machine and top stitch right across there, just like we did on the sides. And that's going to close it up. All right, it is all closed up. We are ready to put it inside. And as you see, because we did some top stitching and stuff, it is smaller and it will fit in this. And if you did have it real full, it will be a little harder to get in. So I hope you didn't overfill it. So what we're going to do is we are just going to stick this first end back in there. And then we're going to push down the rice bag, and we're going to pull this bottom piece right here, and then we'll shake it so that the rice bag will go down that way. And you can have the seam going any way on your rice bag. I'm just trying to get it to lay in there flat. Corners in the corner. There we go. Make sure I fill all those corners. That's good. I think this is a great gift to share with friends. Even older people in a nursing home would probably appreciate something like this because of if they have arthritis or something, they could lay this on a sore muscle, a sore joint to help them have some pain relief. I love them for keeping my feet warm at night, so I'm going to continue using mine for that. Now, what would really be cute too is if you took, let me find, okay, if you took some mini charm packs, and these are just 2.5-inch squares, or if you cut charm squares into 4 and made 4-inch square blocks and make little hand warmers. And these can go in pockets. This would be a great size right here. If you had your block on it, it'd be a little heart block right there. And of course you could use any block. In fact, what I was thinking when I put this heart block on is I'm going to make a case for it. That way I can put change the case anytime, like with Christmas, I could put a Christmas one on. Of course, you're probably not going to be needing this as much in the summertime or in the spring or the early fall, but I thought, you know, you could easily change out your case to a seasonal or a different print, and that would be a lot of fun. So I hope you enjoyed this idea. I know I really enjoy making things like this, and I think my brain enjoys trying to figure out everything. And the challenge of only using 5-inch charm squares for this, it's always fun to challenge yourself to see if you can do something. And it worked out just perfectly. I think this one turned out really well. In fact, I like it better than I like my original. I like the scrappiness of it. I like the background fabrics and the scrappiness of this backing. So I think this would be pretty in any fabric line. Use scraps, whatever you have. I know I cut scraps in 5-inch squares, so I have a ton of 5-inch squares. I could coordinate any color line and try to make it really cute. So I do hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope that you have been inspired to try it. If you like this video, please consider subscribing. I would really appreciate that. Also, don't forget to like and share. And I hope you join me again in my sewing room or the kitchen or the garden soon. Thanks so much for watching.